Welcome back to Behind the Why. Another episode with us talking to you about what's going on in the world around us. What do you say about that?
There's a lot going on.
That's
right?
a lot going on.
Always.
Deception. On Behind the Why.
Let's do it.
Okay, before we get started, I'm going to invite you again to go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel.
Ding, ding.
We are really hoping that you guys will get this conversation going. Keep it going. I don't mind if you disagree with us. We can talk about it in the comment section, but go ahead and like and subscribe and share this channel with as many people as you can. And let's keep this conversation going, because the closer we get to, November 6th, the more
November 3rd.
more important this day becomes.
Oh, yeah.
We
November
got
3rd
11 Mondays left.
Is it 11 now? Oh, my
It
gosh.
was 12 last week. 11 Mondays left. So it's time to get on it and get real.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. This week in the news, had a number of things going on. One of the big things is the DNC convention, the virtual convention, which is kind of fitting because if Joe wins, we have a virtual president. I guess it's good that you have a convention where they're not really there doing anything, because if he wins the White House, he's going to be there not doing anything.
Here's what to say. I'm definitely, critical of, and I work on this because I want to make sure I'm getting good variety, but I'm definitely critical of the Democrat anything, to be quite honest. So the Democratic National Convention.
The difference is we don't hide that.
I don't hide it. No, I'm very critical of it, and I'm open about that.
Try to have documentation.
I try to,
definitely. And for what we're saying, though. So
yeah,
it's not like it's not just our opinion.
No, it's not just. I'm always kind of like on edge, though, kind of like, hey, what are you saying? What's really going on here, right? And so I checked in a couple times during the DNC, right? I had to turn some of it off because I was like, I just can't take it.
Couldn't watch all of it.
And then they had that one guy. What's his name? I'll put a picture of him. He's the guy, that black dude. I think he's like a fashion guy, and like he always wears his dress.
Yes.
And he was singing, and I'm like, why do they always bring out the guy in the dress? It's just
why
I don't
is
get
it
it.
the Democrats every 4 years think if they sing and dance for black folk, that's all they need to do to get our votes?
Because it works.
And then they had this black guy. I don't know who he was. Supposed to be praying.
Oh, I didn't watch that.
Oh my God!
I heard about it.
It was blasphemous.
Yeah, I heard some people talking about it.
And it was just blasphemous. And I was like, "Come on, people! We've got to pull back. We get to the point where we're so deep into our emotions that we can't think straight.
Right.
You know, you hate Trump. I mean, like they said, that Trump derangement syndrome is real.
Right.
And if you're so triggered by anything Trump that you're willing to hurt yourself, to move against yourself, then that tells you something's wrong.
Well, and what got me, earlier this week, I was just thinking about this idea of deception, right? And how real deception, obviously, when you're deceived, you don't even consider the fact that you could be wrong.
Right.
And we talked about this before, but it's really been on my mind, is because when this whole thing first started, a few months ago with COVID, and then the Black Lives Matter and the riots and everything, and people I knew and actually turned to in a lot of ways, even like people who were pastors and different people that I listened to, and they're all of a sudden talking about Black Lives Matter and supporting these things, and I was kind of like, okay. And then people who I know and love started making me feel like I was crazy. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, am I wrong?
Right.
And I kid you not, I went into my room, I was alone with the Lord, and I'm like, God, if I'm wrong, show me. Because number one, I hate being wrong. I was that kid in school who an A- was bad. Because I wanted to do right. I wanted to do well. And I still kind of have that thing. I get that from my mother, I believe. That personality of I don't like to be wrong.
And my thing is this, is that I don't mind if someone corrects me if I'm wrong.
No.
That's the only thing about me. If you can show me where I'm wrong, I will own it. And that's why I'll tell every people when I talk to people online, or I get a rebuff back in a comment, I'll go into dialogue with them. I had a very long dialogue with a series of people this week. And I said, okay, but these are the reasons, these are the facts behind what I say. And so when you come back to me and you say, well, I feel and I think, I'm like, okay, you feel and you think, but as our friend Ben Shapiro says, the truth don't care about your feelings.
Right, facts don't care about your feelings.
They don't care about your feelings. And so we see this. But what triggered me, or what got me thinking this week, when we start talking about this concept of deception, is a spiritual principle that you see in the Gospels, where Jesus is talking to his followers. And he begins to give them a teaching on the parables, and particularly the parable of the seed and the sower. And afterwards, his disciples came to him and said, "That was pretty cool, but what were you talking about?"
Can you explain it to us, please?
And he said, "It is given to you to know the answer.
Right.
But to them, there's not given to them to know." He said, "Because in hearing they will not hear. Mm-hmm. In seeing they will not see." And I used to be bothered by that. And as I got older now, I realized what the Lord was saying is that some people cannot be bothered with the truth. Mm-hmm. And I have run into that time and time. I mean, how many times? I even heard President candidate Joe Biden talking about the South Carolina thing. You know, even today, still putting out lies about what President Trump said. Mm-hmm. And he knows he's lying. He's coloring what the president said in a certain way so that it sounds bad rather than playing in context with what he really said.
To get that emotional response. And even so yesterday we were watching Joe Biden giving his speech, right? And the whole time I'm like, he's trying to evoke emotion. I was like, we know that people respond to storytelling and emotional response, and it's all just emotional stuff, and stuff that's been proven false.
They know it's wrong.
Yeah, and even
but they say it anyway.
And even when Michelle Obama, right? They keep talking about the whole cages, and I'm like, yeah, okay, tell the whole story.
The cages were done by who?
Tell the whole story.
By who?
Right, Obama. So I'm like,
the cages were. Look it up. It was done by Obama. The photographs they were floating around were photographed when Obama was in office, and that they put him on the network and show him around as if Trump did it.
Right. And again, I think we can't reiterate this enough. We talked about this, I think, a couple times ago, right? On one of the shows. People get so bogged down about Democrat, Republican. So bogged down. Right? When really, it does go down to principle. Why am I critical when I see something Democrat? Because I know the ideology that is informing the current Democratic platform.
Now, let me say this. I'm going to say this because a lot of people think, I'm a black guy from the South, grew up in Selma, Alabama. So I got pedigree until I married my wife, who's white.
Brainwashed you.
I'm from California. And a lot of my black family and friends think that I have gone off the reservation.
Right.
And so I challenge them, and I challenge those who are watching today to think principally. Right. Because I have said time and time again, between George Bush 1 and Obama, there ain't been a dime's worth of difference in the president, regardless who was in the office. Right. The country continued the same downward slide. Jobs kept leaving America. Manufacturing jobs were going overseas. The inner cities were getting worse. Abortion rates were getting worse. The cultural climate in America was getting more and more perverse. I didn't see a dime's worth of difference between Bush 1 and Obama. And that's regardless whether Democrat or Republican. So it's not about Democrat, Republican for me.
Right.
I've always voted. I've been a registered Democrat since I've been into the Marine Corps, since I joined the Marine Corps under Ronald Reagan, because I had this idea that I might have to go to war, and I wanted to be able to come home alive.
You just said registered Democrat. You didn't mean that.
A registered Republican. Did I say Democrat?
You said Democrat.
I originally registered as a Democrat growing up in Alabama, but then when I joined the Marine Corps and I got out and I saw the world and I began to look at what was happening, because I was watching what had happened under President Carter, and I'm thinking, okay, I have not seen the truth.
Right.
I have been fed a line, and now that my life is on the line where they may send me overseas to fight,
I want to come home alive.
Right. I want to get somebody in office who would give me a chance to come home alive.
Right.
And so I started voting at that point as a Republican. And then at the next opportunity, I then registered as a Republican. But since that time, I've voted Republican and Democrat, depending on who or what man or woman was running for which particular office. I've always tried to judge the character of the person. But the closer we've come in here to these last days, that line has been getting brighter, not duller. In law enforcement, we have this thing called a bright red line, which means in you're going down making these decisions, you want to make sure you avoid crossing that bright red line. So, i.e., you walk into a restaurant and the person wants to give you a meal. You know, so it's a gratuity, yeah, no, maybe, okay, you can discuss that. Okay, I walk into a restaurant and say, hey, I'm a cop, give me the meal. That's crossing a bright red line.
Yeah.
So that's a difference. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing people crossing the bright red line. And then I see people who are deceived either of themselves or because they have drank the Kool-Aid. And if you listen to that stuff that was being put out by the Democratic Party and you believe it, and if you just keep listening to it, you will be deceived.
Yes.
There's no way you cannot be.
Well, it's like I told you, and I've talked to many people about this, especially young people going into college, right? If you don't have a firm foundation, if you don't know who you are, you don't have a kind of a firm, at least, idea of your identity, you will be swayed.
Absolutely.
You know why? Because I went through the system. I went through I call it the system. I went through the system. But it really is like...
It's indoctrination
Some of the nicest people I met, though, right? Nicest people ever. They would give you the shirt off their back, okay? Right. But there's this deception, right? It truly is like this indoctrination that takes place in what's being taught, the examples that are used in every single lesson.
Everyone.
And it's like, okay, if you don't know who you are...
Slowly but sure, you start to feel crazy.
Yeah.
And so then you want to capitulate so
right.
you don't feel crazy.
Right.
And that's the whole purpose behind it, is to get you to be swayed.
Right.
And so people will always say, keep your religion to yourself and all this stuff, but a man is only the summation of his beliefs. So whether I call that belief system Christianity or hedonism or Islam, whatever I believe constitutes my religion, constitutes who I am fundamentally. And so what we're finding is that a lot of people who have the tag of Christian do not have a Christian worldview. So they don't see the world through a Christian lens, i.e., I've talked to a number of people about the issue of abortion, and the first thing out of their mouth is, it's just another sin. It's like any other sin. And so you go on to go, and this conversation is, well, they want to commit that sin, that's between them and God. They can commit that sin. And then they start to justify one sin by highlighting another sin.
Right.
And that's not the point. The point is to avoid sin.
As a child of God, I was just talking to a friend about this, right? As a child of God, we really don't, I think in the Christian world, right? We create these different degrees of sin, or we create this fence where I'm just kind of I'm trying it out, or I'm just going through a hard time. I have one foot in, one foot out. But you read scripture, you don't see that principle.
No.
It's either you're in or you're out.
Period.
And what is it in Revelation? If you're, I'm totally paraphrasing, but if you're sinning, keep on sinning. If you're my child, keep on being my child.
That's
either way, I'm coming
back.
And it's like there really isn't this fence. And
so
we create these fences in our minds.
When we look into the current atmosphere, like with let's go to the basic thing, the election of Kamala Harris. Okay, someone who is was as vitriol as she was against Biden, now selected as his running mate, and all of a sudden, everything is okay.
Everything
is okay. And then we're told as people, especially black folk again, that this is the best choice for you.
And they're saying this is historic, this is like a
all
game changer.
The stuff except for the fact that she's going to do anything that's really going to help America. Right. And so we look at this, and again, we go back to this concept of deception. Again, Jesus said that in hearing, they will not hear. In seeing, they will not see. Therefore, they will not understand. And you find that those people who fall into that category are those who willfully choose to remain ignorant. They willfully choose to not investigate their thoughts, while all the time accusing you of being closed-minded.
Right.
And so we look at this, and I know that they don't investigate their thoughts, because every time you talk to one of them, they repeat the same tired lie. President Trump is a racist. And I go, okay, what proof of his racism?
Show me how.
Well, back in 1972, he didn't rent houses to black people. Okay, what were you doing in 1972 that you've changed now?
Or even I hear this thing, they
South Carolina thing.
I've had people tell me, well, you're not pro-life, you're pro-birth. And I was like, okay, I've heard that before too.
It's all part of the deception.
It's all part of the deception.
It sounds good. If you look at the abortion thing, because I've been around long enough to kind of hear this argument from its genesis. Back in 72, 73, when abortion became legal, of course, I wasn't thinking about having babies or making babies. I was only 10 years old at the time. But when I got into high school and I started hearing this thing about abortion, and I thought about it just the way it was presented. It was just a thing that happened. And I was sitting at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and a pastor, I can't think of his name now. Him and his son. His son took after his son died. He was in class with my brother. I'll look up his name. But he was preaching, and he said, quoting statistics about how many black babies are being born out of wedlock. And he said, it's not that there's more black babies being conceived out of wedlock. It's just that the white people are killing their babies through abortion. And I thought, abortion? What is he talking about? And that's the first time I really heard about abortion was at church, and it was talking about in that context. And then you start to think about this. In the beginning, the lie was what? It's not a baby. It's just a glob of cells. It's not a baby. It's not. And then it was, well, okay, it may be a human, but it's not really viable.
It's not viable. It can't feel anything.
Yeah, all that. And now they've come all the way close, right? Remember that bright red line I told you about? Right. Now it's like, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl or whatever it is. If you don't want the baby, kill it.
Right.
Now, see,
no matter the age.
They've crossed the bright red line. And so now what has happened, though, is that we as people have got to look at this and say, am I going to allow myself to be deceived? Am I going to buy the lie and saying that these guys are going to put me back on the plantation and take care of me like the good master did? Because, the master took care of the slave on the plantation. He provided the slave a place to sleep. He provided him the food to eat and a pair of shoes, one pair of shoes a year, and the clothes he put on his back. And so the master took care of the slave, quote unquote. And that's what the plantation does. Unfortunately, then everything you do in the plantation, you don't have ownership of it.
Right.
It belongs to the master, and the master never quite take care of you to the point where you're equal to the master.
You will never always
be below the master. When the master get tired of his clothes, that's when he gives them to you. He don't buy the brand new clothes and give them to you. See what I'm saying? And so we see this same system being perpetrated just by different words now.
Right.
And we have to go back to what we said some time ago, that it really is elitism. It's not racism, guys. It is elitism. That's why you can have all these puppets. I was listening to LeBron James talking to them going, dude, you are nobody's victim. You are nobody's victim. And yet he's whining and complaining about being a victim of racism.
Or Oprah Winfrey talking about white privilege.
What white privilege does Oprah Winfrey can't overcome?
I'm like, Oprah, you overcame so much.
She was much more attractive when she was talking about overcoming her hardships.
Yeah.
Now her hardships is defining her. And the same thing with these guys. All these millionaires running around making all this money in a system that they say is against them, in a system that keeps the black man down. But yet these black folks are the stars of the system.
What's so funny to me is that these same people who are talking about this lack of privilege and oppression are the same people like yesterday, right? Biden says, when I think of America, one word comes to mind. Opportunities. I'm like, really? Because all you people say is that there's no opportunities, right? That people of color can't succeed. And so I'm like, okay.
But see, that's what I'm saying. It's truth has not come into the conversation with these people.
No.
So you look at Biden, you look at President Obama gets up there talking the other day, and Biden, they were talking about bringing jobs back. I'm like, I distinctly remember Obama as president saying, these jobs are gone for good. They'll never be back. These jobs are going forever. This is voodoo. All this stuff he was talking about. What kind of economics is this? He talking about all this stupid stuff to a man who made his life doing business. Right. And Trump said, I'm bringing the jobs back. Those jobs never come. Those manufacturing jobs are gone for good. Obama, quote, those manufacturing jobs are gone for good. What did Trump do when he get in office? Brought them back.
Well, here's one thing oh my gosh, I think it's so important. People are so bogged down on what people say. But here's the thing. People make a lot of proclamations that they don't really believe. You want to see what someone believes? Look at what they do.
Oh, gosh,
Look at their life, right? The Bible talks about it. Look at the fruit.
Look at the fruit.
And so people are even bogged down about the way Trump says something. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, let's look at what he did.
Yes.
Let's look at what he does.
Here's Biden, though. Here's Biden. You make me president. I'm going to do this and this and this. I'm change this.
47 years.
You've been in office longer than most people have been alive.
And
you ain't done jack. You talking about how you're not going to be a puppet of China. That's all you did. He courted China like she was the sweetest girl in high school. He talking about he's gonna hold out to her. Look at the Iranian deal he signed, and he put, I'm gonna be good for black people. He signed into law.
No.
That put black folks in jail like crazy.
There's one thing that Biden said.
Help me out. Help me. I'm holding on. Help me.
One thing.
What thing?
He said that I believe yesterday.
What's that?
He said that this election is like one of the most important elections in the history of our nation.
Oh, I believe that.
And he says, and the nation will go one of two ways. And I'm like,
he's right about that.
You're right. And the soul of the nation is at stake. I'm like, you're right.
He's right about that. That's one thing that I heard Biden say, though. It's one thing I heard Biden say that I had to stand up and applaud because I thought he's speaking truth. He said, I am Joe Biden, and I will beat Joe Biden for president.
No, that was a while ago when he said,
I know it.
I'm Joe Biden and I'm going to defeat Joe Biden.
I'm going to beat Joe Biden. I'm like, you sure are. The more you talk, the more you hurt yourself.
He did really well yesterday, though, speaking-wise, in the sense of...
You see him reading the prompter, man? Yeah, anybody can read a prompter.
He did well. Because honestly, like, and I mean this, I've seen him speak in different places, and I'm, like, concerned, like, this man. But yesterday, I was like, he did well.
He had a big, giant prompter, and nobody in the room but him and his buddies. So, you know, my point is, I'm not slamming Joe because he's old. I would rather have seen him retire and go off in the sunset of his life. I mean, what was he, like 900? So
no, he's like...
You see him go...
I think he's like 79, 80.
To just go and relax and enjoy the fruit of all the money he's taken from the American people for the last 47 years, him and his son. Go ahead and just relax. But he's out there now, and he's in a position where he can't do the job. He can't do the job, and he knows it, and everybody who's holding him like a puppet knows it. They had Hillary Clinton up there talking against them like, if there's anybody who's been proven to be a liar, it's Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And why would you put her on the platform? It just shows you that this system, and this is what I started to say earlier, is that I want you to hear what I'm saying, because I think a lot of people get confused on this. I did not vote for the Republican Party. I was sick and tired of the Republican Party. They are part of the swamp. I voted for a person who came in from the outside and said, I'm going to drain the swamp.
And he did. He's doing so good.
And that's why I and millions and millions of people voted for Donald Trump.
Exactly. A lot of people.
It wasn't because we were Republicans.
And it wasn't a white lash. A lot of black people voted for Trump, too.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like was it a white lash when the white folk voted for Obama?
Right.
It wasn't a white lash then. So why is it a white lash when white folk vote for Trump? And I heard something that Trump said, and I wish I can find a clip of it because it was brilliant. He said, I'm president for one reason. And that's because of the lousy job that Obama and Biden did. He goes, I was quite well off. He said, I didn't need the money.
And he's not taking
he goes, I didn't need the money.
How much is it a year? 140,000 or 100,000?
No, it's way more than that.
Way more than that now? 400,000?
He said,
either way, he's not taking it.
I didn't need the money. He said, I'm here because I watched them destroy the country that I love. He said, I'm in this office because they failed. And I thought to myself, that's exactly why I voted for him. Because I looked at what Obama did, and I think, man, abortion's gone through the roof like crazy. The educational system's been compromised. And now instead of educating kids, we got to be worried about telling each other that a guy can be a girl and a girl can be a guy, and which bathroom to use and can't use it. That's Obama's legacy.
Right.
His failed process with the health care plan where he took over health care. The government took over health care. And all of a sudden, healthcare went crazy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Our healthcare program needs to be revamped. I totally agree with that. It's just stupid the way our healthcare is done, but that's part of the swamp. It needs to be drained. And Obama started this cop-hating stuff. I don't care how many people want to pretend that's not the case. Obama is a really good... you thought Slick Willie was good at it, but Obama makes Clinton look like a chump.
Obama is all things to all people.
That's what I'm saying.
And he does it very well.
You thought Clinton was good.
Well.
Clinton was fantastic in working a crowd. But when Obama works a crowd, it's like Clinton is still in first grade.
He is.
Obama gets up there and he is so smooth. He talks out of one side of his mouth.
He'll be a reverend if you want him to.
He'll take on the black preacher tone.
I'm saying he'll be everything.
He'll jump Muslim on you.
Yeah.
Then he jump rank atheist on you. Obama is smooth. He is so good. That's what I said about his wife, Michelle. I wish she wasn't as good as she is because she is so good. In front of the camera, she is fantastic.
And I think that's why these people are so gung-ho, right, in supporting Biden. I mean, they weren't really gung-ho, right? We don't like Biden, but... they're for the system of the Democratic, the swamp, really.
Yeah,
and they're part of that. You know,
yes.
I'm sitting there thinking, why is Hillary Clinton speaking? Why?
What
purpose do you have? And it's because they're a part of that system.
Did we forget Benghazi? Did we forget all that stuff? Did we forget the emails? Right. Did we forget the Russiagate? Yes, the Russiagate that she paid for. And so all this stuff. And it's like, wow, we just threw all that away.
If we reminisce, right, and go back to that wonderful day when we voted for, or when we were seeing the election results, I remember, and the anxiety. I remember the anxiety I was feeling, and
I knew how important it was. This was important for the nation.
But even I remember listening to people who did vote for Trump, and it was for the exact same reasons we're just talking about, right? They said we want someone different from the outside, okay, who's going to make a difference, and Trump did all that and more. Honestly,
let me tell you something again.
And I hope it does what you can.
This is why I hate the swamp.
I hope so.
I will always be a child of the South in my heart. I always have a place for Selma in my heart. I'm praying the Lord will one day allow me to go and do some work in that area. Until that time, I'll keep praying for it from here. But I was watching a program the other day. It's one of the poorest cities in America.
Oh, yeah.
And it was in poorest counties in America. It's Lowndes County, which is right up the stone throw road from my house in Selma. You go straight through Lowndes County to get from Selma to Montgomery. And I had a girlfriend that lived down in Lowndes County out there in Whitehall for a while. But anyway, that's a whole different story. One of my best friends growing up, they moved out to Lowndes County. Mm-hmm. And Miss Susie had bought this big double-wide mobile home. Beautiful mobile home. Moved out there in the middle of the country. And it was a beautiful mobile home, but it didn't have any plumbing attached to it. So the toilet was connected to nothing. You had some water, but you couldn't flush your toilet because it didn't go nowhere. So if you flushed the toilet, it would just run out underneath the house on the ground. So you just went out to an outhouse back out in the woods. Mm-hmm. That was 40-some years ago.
Right.
And I'm watching this report online the other day about Lowndes County. And it's one of the poorest counties in America. And the guy who does these checks for poverty for the UN went and did an inspection of Lowndes County. And he came back and he reported how horrible. He said it's worse than third world countries. And they show these videos and there's just raw sewage running in people's yards. I'm like, okay, that was the case 40 years ago. And I started thinking, well, who's been in charge?
That's $1 million question.
Democrats.
Ding, ding, ding.
Democrats been in charge. And I look at the board. I look at the county commissioners. Mm-hmm. There's 3 black guys, 2 white guys on the board, the county commissioners there. 2 of them, 1 black guy, 1 white guy, has been on there for 16 years apiece. And there's still raw sewage sitting in the streets. And I'm going, this is why we got to drain the swamp.
Right.
Because you get people who get in the office and they come down and they have their meetings and they shake people's hands and they tell you how wonderful and how much they love you and they're going to take care of you, and then they go back and get that check and they don't do nothing.
No.
They don't do nothing. And for 40 years, these people have been living in open sewage. Now, a lot of that I blame on them.
Right.
If you got open sewage in your yard, do something about it.
Right.
Don't just sit there and wait for the government to help you. I mean, if you got to dig an outhouse yourself, dig an outhouse. Don't just put poop in your yard. But still, at the same time, the government has to be involved in this. Mm-hmm. And when you look at this, you go, guys, you got to do this. Mm-hmm. And then we look at these big cities, these communities run right. Look at the lifestyle in these big Democrat-led cities. They're going from bad to worse
I think
to worse.
It's true until the people decide, I'm tired of this, and let the scales fall, because it really is deception, right? When you're deceived, you don't even think to ask, I might be wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And so I saw this photo, and it was so interesting. So it was it looked like it was in a courtroom, and the person on trial, he's this black guy. Okay, the defense attorney is a black guy, and then there's an officer in there who's a black guy. And I'm like, look at all these black people, different walks of life. Okay, a different role. You have someone who's a lawyer. You have an officer in there, and you got the criminal who's black. And I was like, and yet here we have people talking about the color that's so important. I'm like, no, it's a life choice you make. And this picture, just in a photo, was saying so much. I'm like, the life choice.
Here's deception. Here's deception like this. Give me a glass of water. Not a bottle of water, but a glass of water. I want to take a sip of water.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Who is that?
It's deception, though.
Who is
Obama
that?
at Flint,
In Flint, Michigan. Water's still a mess up there.
You know, but it's just like, I look at that, I was like, deception.
Deception.
And there's so many people, and
Stop
I think the bigger problem is
President
like
Obama.
Christians, people who, I'm going to say this, people who claim to be followers of Christ, to be born again, but they're not even willing to consider if they're wrong. And I'm like, that number one should be a problem, because I think as believers, we should always be asking, are we wrong, right?
What does Paul tell us?
One second, real quick.
Go ahead.
And you read Psalm 139, right? What does David say at the end? He said, search me, O God, see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the everlasting. That should be our prayer all the time.
And what does Paul say in 2 Corinthians? He goes, check yourself to see if you yet be in the faith, lest you be a reprobate. Mm-hmm. So we have to come in. And that's one thing I tell you, I constantly check myself. When I say stuff about things, I say stuff about people, I'm like, I want to make sure. So when I start talking about, a brother was hitting me up online this past week about the great switch. I'm like, it never happened.
Right.
It never happened. The big switch just never happened. I go through history, I look, and it's just not there. Mm-hmm. And then when you tell people this, instead of looking at the fact that it never happened, they get on something else. Like I quoted Dinesh D'Souza to this run, brother, and instead of talking about the big switch, his focus then became on the failings that Dinesh D'Souza had. Okay, we can debate whether or not you thought Dinesh D'Souza did these things inappropriately or whether or not, whether or not when his first marriage broke up and all that. That wasn't the question.
Because people, if you don't have an answer, we tend to just like, I'm going to start talking bad about you.
Yeah.
And ad hominem, I'm going to attack you.
So you go back to the fact that the big switch never happened.
Right.
Yes, I was surprised when the people of Alabama voted George Wallace in a second time. I was like, are you serious? After what this man did, y'all brought him back in? He said he repented and changed his mind. I wasn't there. I didn't live through his second term. I lived through his first one, though. And so I don't know what happened to it, what it was like. People say he changed. I don't know. But I see that the systems of governance have not changed. And that is the problem. We look at this over and over again, and yet instead of looking at the facts as they are, we have a tendency to ignore them for this dream that we want. We want so much, and I'm talking about black folk in particular now, we want so much for the Democrat Party to be what it says it is, that we're willing to ignore what it's doing. And I was talking this morning about this same thing, is that, you look at other communities of minorities, and the Jewish community came into this country, and look where they are as a community.
Right.
Look at the Asian community as a community. Look at the Italian community as a community. Look at the black community as fragmented. Still fragmented. Crabs in a bucket. We don't, the last, and I've said this before, the last great community, black community I can think of was Paradise Valley up in Detroit. And that was in the 50s and 60s. And that's gone away. We don't see any great black communities where blacks have create black businesses and support black businesses. We see little bitty things, but no great rise of entrepreneurship, no great rise into business. We don't funnel back into our community. We are our own greatest problem. And as long as black folk are going to look into this master called the Democratic Party, we're going to remain slaves on the plantation.
And there's a lot of people I heard, like the whole walk away movement, right? Where they're even getting away from black community. Candace Owens said this. She's like, there's no black community.
That's what my point. There's
but
no
it's
black
like,
community.
so they're going more around just being an American. Like going back to that, because there is really no community. And at this point, quite honestly, it's like we're so fragmented as a nation in general.
You can go
where now you're either right or left. It seems,
you can go in a place right now and go to Chinatown in America. You can go to Little Italy in America. Yeah. All these places have communities. Show me where little black America is at. It don't happen.
It's not a thing.
The only community that you can say identify quote unquote as black is the inner city.
Yeah.
Boys in the hood. I'm sorry to say boys on the hood. Boys in the hood. Colors. That's the black community. That's what we portray here in America.
Right.
And that's not who we are. But that's what we cling to. Look at our music.
Right.
This what's her face with
Cardi B.
Cardi B. We cling to that. We elevate that as a hero. She's pornographic. She's vile, and yet we hold her up as some kind of hero. She's not interviewing Biden.
I know. I was like, really?
We got people who are killed because they're committing crimes. Yeah, we got people getting killed because they're committing crimes, and instead of saying this guy was a thug, no, we're gonna say he was a victim.
Right.
And say their name. Yeah, say their name. Crook. Theft. Bank robber.
Right.
Murderer. Druggie. That's their name. So as long as we're willing to ignore that, as long as we're willing to play like that's not real, we're always gonna be crabs in a bucket. And you hear these great they get on my nerve. These black millionaires, right? Talking about the people. They don't live in the hood either. LeBron's house ain't in the hood.
Right.
What did Ice-T say? I tried to live in the hood, but the brothers kept breaking and stealing my stuff, so I moved out. Watch what they do, not what they say.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, people make all kinds
not
of
Ice-T, but Ice-T, not Ice Cube. Ice-T. Said
not Ice-T, I think it's
It's Ice-T.
Ice-T?
Yeah. Ice Cube is the dark-skinned one with the beard. Ice-T is the light-skinned one.
His name's Ice-T?
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, I didn't make up his name.
Well,
I'm just saying that we have got to, guys, wake up, especially in this, because one thing that the Lord said, he said, be not deceived, because there's many who will go out in my name, in his name, doing evil, seeking to deceive the elect.
right.
So for those of us who say that we're Christians, I will challenge you to make your decisions based on a Christian worldview. What do I mean by Christian worldview? That's a worldview defined by Christ and what God says is right and wrong. Not what is comfortable for you,
Right.
but what God says is right and wrong. If you do that, you're going to be all right.
Yep.
But run the risk of deception, and you never know where you're going to wind up.
That's what gets me, right? In 1 John, even John writes, little children, let no one deceive you. First thing that came to my mind was, which means you can be deceived.
Yes.
So we should be sober-minded. I should always be, again, living that introspective life that we're called to do. And that's, as believers, if someone's not living that way, I would question, just like Paul does. Check yourself and see if you're in the faith. Because if I never have a red flag go off, if I think, oh, I'm good, I'm always right. Like, I'm saved. I got my blessed assurance.
The Bible says, be careful when the world thinks well of you.
Right.
If you find yourself,
friendship with the world.
if you walk in hand with the world, then you're probably in trouble. I'm just saying.
And right now, especially, like we talked about this before, I think we need to sound the alarm. Get ready. I don't know what's going to happen, but it ain't looking good.
He's coming back.
Now, that was looking good. That was looking good. But it's like we need to get right.
For me. That's what Jane Cleaver said. Just like he said he would. He's coming back, y'all. I'm telling you. But until then, you better get behind the why, because there's a lot of people with the microphone that lie. That's a rhyme. Ali, that was good enough for Ali right there.
That's good. I think,
get behind the why, because the folks with the microphone lie. And that includes me. If you think I'm lying, check me out. Look at what I'm saying.
True.
Check me out. I'm not afraid of inspection.
Right.
Check me out. And if I'm lying, call me on it, and I'll go online. I'll go publicly admit that I was wrong. I'll say it. I was wrong. But show me. That's all I say. Because I can show you what I say. If I don't, I'll tell you why.
Right.
I'll always try and tell you why.
Yep.
All right, then. So that brings us to the end of another episode of Behind the Why. And guys, as we get deeper into this election season, you got to avoid the spirit of deception, because there's nothing like a fool who don't know they're a fool.
Right.
And I say that kindly. I mean, I'm not trying to call nobody crazy. I'm saying when you don't know you're wrong, then you run really hard in the wrong direction. So you want to make sure that all your effort is taking you where you want to go. You don't want to wind up somewhere by mistake.
Exactly.
So get behind the why, y'all.
Know where you're going. Know what you're
doing. Until next time, you know what we say. Peace. Love you. Get behind the why.